The Prime Minister of Dominica, Roosevelt Skerrit, has been sworn in for a new term following his party's sweeping victory in Friday's general election. President Charles Savarin administered the oath of office. Skerrit's Labour Party won 18 out of the 21 seats in Parliament, 3 more than it had before.
I, Roosevelt Skerrit, do swear.
I, Roosevelt Skerrit, do swear.
That I will faithfully execute.
That I will faithfully execute.
The office of Prime Minister.
The office of Prime Minister.
Without fear or favor.
Without fear or favor.
Affection or ill will.
Affection or ill will.
And that in the execution of the functions of that office.
And that in the execution of the functions of that office.
I will honor, uphold, and preserve.
I will honor, uphold, and preserve.
The Constitution of the Commonwealth of Dominica.
The Constitution of the Commonwealth of Dominica.
So help me God.
So help me God.
They came here to hear just one word: fraud. These were supposed to be their allies, the Organization of American States Observers. Behind all this, there was the vivid memory of Bolivia, where a lightning coup of state was based exclusively on an OAS preliminary report. But in Dominica, they were prepared. Here, with just around 30,000 voters, it was impossible to claim fraud without accurate evidence. Astonished, the bad losers turned into rage.
The question I'm asking is this: what is the validity of these elections, and will you say something about whether these elections are valid or not?
Major recommendations that were made that you should be looking at and make recommendations to address those 2 problems.
One by one, the electoral missions discarded all complaints.
We are here to tell you that we observed the electoral process and that we are satisfied that on election day, the people who voted, their votes reflected the will of those who voted.
In concluding, it is our considered view that the results reflect the collective will of the people who voted, and that the 6th December election was conducted in accordance with the laws of Dominica.
Our team visited 200 of the 15 polling stations, and none of our members reported any irregularities.
After a problem-free polling day, because of these situations, we asked party agents whether they had any observation, complaint, or something to say, and they all said they had no complaints, and that everything was fine.
This did not prevent the right-wing candidate from going on with his regime change script, even though walking on moving sands.
We are saying to the people of Dominica, we need now to demand fresh elections, because as far as we're concerned, this illegitimate result renders the election null and void, and it renders the government null and void. We will not recognize this government.
It was this kind of order and tidiness, even in a rural community like this, what neutralized any attempt to delegitimize the process. There was no single complaint from polling stations. Dominicans are a peaceful and religious people, mixing politics, religion, music, and dance. A striking contrast with the opposition calls for war prior to the election day.
We will not hypocritically talk peace when the justice of the people of Dominica is being injured and when the rights of the people of Dominica are being set aside.
On Friday 6, ballot boxes arrived for the final count, and Dominica's map gradually turns into Labour red. Party members began celebrating early. The Prime Minister wasted no time in addressing the nation to prevent last-minute surprises.
In communities, families, and at the national level, there must, from tonight, be peace. The essential healing and rebuilding from the events of the last few weeks can only take place in an atmosphere of restraint, respect, and calm. And that is what I call for: restraint, respect, and calm.
Next day, and with the Bolivian ghost gone, Skerrit would open up personal feelings to foreign correspondents.
It's a vindication of all of the persecution and attacks and character assassinations and all of the involvement of a number of external actors in our elections. I think this is the ultimate vindication in politics, and I think the people, the voters of Dominica, recognize that.
He also shared some thoughts about the OAS and its Secretary General, Luis Almagro.
The OAS has lost its importance and its relevance and the respect that it has had. And for the OAS to come back to where it was prior to Mr. Almagro taking office, he has to be removed. If he's re-elected, my friend, woe be unto the Latin American grouping. And you remember, CELAC was formed because of the issues we have with OAS.
Always cautious, Skerrit was sworn in just hours after official results had been published, calmly showing who is in charge in the country. It is probably not the end of all conspiracies, but it is surely a signal of peace, at least for now. Jesus Romero and Alejandro Kirk, Telesur, Dominica.
In other news, in Bolivia, a national congress of the Movement Towards Socialism Party held on Saturday named Evo Morales as the director of the Mas Electoral Campaign. The Congress resolved to maintain unity among the social movement bases and leaders in order to organize the upcoming elections. The Mas is demanding that the Legislative Assembly begin a trial against Janine Áñez, in which ministers, the police and the military will be probed for genocide and crimes against humanity. The Mas Congress wants to establish a commission for human rights to follow up on the cases of persecuted and imprisoned members. And the event included the participation of leaders of the coca grower region and other political leaders. They discussed strategies to confront the coup and how to move forward. Official candidates of the upcoming election haven't been named yet.
I think that today we are going to define the beginning of the line of struggle to maintain this process at the head of all the Bolivian people, with that slogan that we are seeing a de facto coup and dictatorial government. I think it's important to ratify the strength of the Bolivian people.
And Morales said in a tweet he appreciated the confidence in appointing him as campaign manager. He said, "We will choose a unitary candidate, and again, we will win the elections in the first round. Thank you for not abandoning me, and I will always be with you. Together we will continue to make history as we have done until now." This Monday is the last day in office for Argentina's right-wing president Mauricio Macri. His successor, Alberto Fernández, has said that his administration cannot recognize Bolivia's de facto government, adding that for Argentina, Bolivia has no president until democratic elections are held.
For us, Bolivia has no government until Bolivian citizens vote in democratic elections. It's as simple as that. A de facto government is not a government. So until Bolivians vote, they don't have a president we can recognize.
And on Friday, Argentina's incoming president introduced his government cabinet. Fernández named Santiago Cafiero as cabinet chief, a political scientist with long-standing ties to Peronism. As Minister of the Economy, Fernández chose Martín Guzmán, who will have the task of dealing with the colossal IMF loan incurred by outgoing President Mauricio Macri. Macri is leaving Argentina in the midst of an economic crisis that has seen over 40% of the population slide under the poverty line. We have more stories coming up. Don't go away. Welcome back. The Prime Minister of Dominica, Roosevelt Skerrit, has been sworn in for a new term following his party's sweeping victory in Friday's elections. And we have more on that story, as you can also read it on our website. We'll continue with that coverage. Now we turn to other news. The main streets of Bogotá turned into a giant stage at the weekend where famous Colombian musicians performed in support of the national strike that has lasted more than 3 weeks. More protests and stoppages are planned for the coming days.
This is where people usually come to practice sports on Sundays. Now it's a stage for artists to protest. In this song for Colombia, actors and more than 40 groups, including well-known singers, joined the national strike.
We are here as a part of the strike, giving courage to it, believing that if we unite, we are stronger. We must unite to fight, because we want a better country, a better present for everyone.
Thousands have come to accompany them. They are expressing their dissatisfaction with the situation in the country and with politicians who they believe are undermining peace, like the former president Álvaro Uribe.
We have come together because we believe that we have many reasons to march. We believe that the protest is just because it is not a matter of the right or left, or of political parties. We are here for dignity, because we believe that people have to be heard.
Artists and citizens demanding better health and education, and no more murders of social leaders. No more violence. The mobile stage traveled 7 kilometers, raising their voices through music.
We want the government to adopt a different attitude. We want people who are willing to listen and change things, because the people are asking them in a peaceful and non-violent way. In this way, we support what is going on and want to keep people's spirits up.
There is no sign of the strike coming to an end. New demonstrations are planned in the coming days, with pot-banging pans and other protests, demanding respect for human rights, the environment, diversity, and economic improvements.
The U.S. government has dropped its case against the Gray Zone editor Max Blumenthal and a member of the Embassy Protection Collective, Benjamin Rubenstein. The case rested on an accusation by a Venezuelan opposition activist who claimed that Max and Ben assaulted her while they were delivering food to Venezuela's embassy in Washington, D.C. We spoke to Max about the events.
This is part of a pattern of the right-wing Venezuelan opposition in Washington, whose leadership is directly being paid by the U.S. government, targeting their political opponents using law enforcement as a weapon. We saw this happen recently to Code Pink founder Medea Benjamin, who was almost hauled out of her house on the basis of false charges by Carlos Vecchio, the fake ambassador of Juan Guaido's minions, falsely accusing her of assault. So the government obviously judged that it had no case against me. I guess they didn't want to go to trial. But one of the most interesting things we've learned is that on the night of the alleged incident, where this false accusation is derived from, the Secret Service call logs have disappeared. Pretty much all recordings that the Secret Service made at that time have mysteriously disappeared. So raises a lot of questions about the disappearance of evidence and the collusion between the Secret Service police who are outside the embassy and this violent right-wing Venezuelan mob of opposition hooligans.
2 more indigenous Brazilians from the Guayayara people have been killed by unknown gunmen in the village of El Betel. A car reportedly drove past and someone inside shot at the 2 men who were on a motorcycle. They were returning from a meeting on the defense of their rights. It is suspected that these latest killings were carried out by illegal loggers who have previously targeted forest defenders in the area. Residents have placed much of the blame for these attacks on far-right President Jair Bolsonaro and his anti-indigenous positions. A group of indigenous activists from Brazil protested outside the headquarters of an oil company in Spain, responsible for a recent oil spill. The protesters performed chants and danced outside Repsol's headquarters to highlight this issue. They also raised concerns about the rise in killings of indigenous people and pointed out that transnational companies investing in South America contribute to the violence.
It is a very sad moment because every day in Brazil and in South America we see the killings of indigenous leaders. These are people that are fighting to defend their land, to defend their lives with dignity for the coming generations and for the children. And because of big companies, oil companies, dams, loggers, the agribusiness, mining companies, who have been investing strongly in South America. This has been contributing to what happened yesterday with the killing of 2 leaders from the Guajajara people and many others indigenous leaders. Every day these indigenous people are murdered in South America.
The second day of the International Colloquium on Occupation, Sovereignty and Solidarity ended in Haiti on Sunday. The summit in Port-au-Prince was attended by over 180 guests and denounced the crimes committed by the United Nations military forces during 13 years of occupation. During the day, social organizations resisting the occupation in working-class neighborhoods offered their testimony. Attendees also agreed to relaunch solidarity initiatives and to establish a People's Tribunal to address unemployment, reparations and justice for the victims of cholera, sexual violence and repressive politics.
We want justice, but justice with capital letters. They cannot go unpunished, walking around the world and committing the same crimes against the people.
200,000 Rwandan citizens are said to be vaccinated against the Ebola virus. The new vaccine hopes to protect people against Ebola virus and to stop its spread from the Democratic Republic of Congo. Recently, the World Health Organization declared the Ebola epidemic in the DRC a public health emergency of international concern. Over 2,000 people have been killed by the disease so far, making it the second worst outbreak of Ebola to date.
Today, we recognize the Rwandese decision and the Rwandese government's decision to deploy our Ebola vaccine in a new immunization program that is called Umurinzi. And it's being coordinated by the Ministry of Health. And the new initiative will offer the vaccine to people who cross the borders with DRC on a regular basis, as part of work, as part of school, or other family commitments that they have. And the goal is to boost the protection against Ebola in these populations.
We're taking one last break. Stay with us. Thank you for joining us again. At least 5 people have been confirmed dead and many more are still missing after a volcanic eruption hit a New Zealand tourist destination. Rescue operations are still going on, and so far almost 20 people have been hospitalized after suffering serious injuries from the volcanic eruption. The police have warned the death toll may rise as they have not yet established the extent of the damage. A no-fly zone has been declared over the area.
It is a no-fly zone at the island at the moment, and we will continue to update you on the events as they unfold. But again, can I just say our thoughts are absolutely with the friends and family of those that are injured and those that have died.
The transport system in France remains crippled as the nationwide anti-government strike goes into its 5th day. Protesters continue to march in Paris against the government's pension reform plans. Commuters struggle to get to work as most of the transport system was shut down on Monday. The workers are expressing their anger at the government's plan to change the pension system.
Monday will again be an extremely complicated day for all our passengers, as the network will still be extremely disrupted. We are talking about 15 to 20% of the traffic. It means a slight improvement, but which does not correspond at all to the needs of a Monday.
Finland will have the world's youngest prime minister leading a left-leaning coalition. Sanna Marin is 34 years old and is currently the transport minister. She was elected by the Social Democrats and will be approved by Parliament on Tuesday. She will lead a coalition of 5 parties, all of them led by women. 3 of them are younger than 35 years old. The previous Prime Minister, Antti Rinne, resigned after 6 months in office after he lost support for his handling of a postal workers' strike. At least 43 people were killed in a factory fire in New Delhi, India. The fire broke out early on Sunday in the city's old quarter, where many small manufacturing and storage units are located. Officials said the number of casualties is expected to rise as several others remain seriously injured. The cause of the fire has not yet been established and investigations are ongoing.
My first rescuers went inside with the SCBA with an oxygen cylinder, and they checked if there is any hazardous gas or not. We found there is no hazardous gas, only carbon monoxide content was a little bit high. So because the room was closed, and after some time thereafter, the other team for rescue operations went inside and they carried out the search and rescue operation.
Demonstrators clashed with police in India during a protest over the rape and murder of a 23-year-old woman. Police used water cannons to disperse protesters as outrage over the murder flared across the country. After being raped by a gang of men, the victim was then set on fire, eventually dying at a New Delhi hospital. The attack is the second major case of violence against women recorded in India within the past 2 weeks. Sudan has reduced the number of troops in its military contingent deployed in Yemen to 5,000. Sudanese Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok announced this decision on Sunday. For his part, the chairman of the Supreme Yemeni Revolutionary Committee, Mohammed Ali al-Houthi, said that Sudan's decision to remove its soldiers from Yemen is a positive step that prevents further bloodshed. Sudan joined Saudi Arabia's attack on Yemen, launched in 2015, contributing to a humanitarian crisis in which more than 17 million people are at risk of starvation, according to the United Nations.
But the truth is there isn't a military solution to the Yemeni problem. At the end, it will be a political solution.
The new Latin American Cinema Festival is underway in Cuba. This year, the event celebrates the 60th anniversary of the Cuban Institute of Cinematographic Art and Industry, an institution that has left an indelible cultural legacy on the island.
This is how the young Cuban band, Real Project, honors the experimental sound group from the Cuban Institute of Cinematographic Art and Industry. From a contemporary vision and with musical concepts that draw from jazz, funk, and world music.
We brought together all these sounds along with ours, always respecting the music and the ideas, which I think are a great contribution to our sound and our generation.
In Cuba back in 1969, the experimental sound group combined music, cinema, and the revolutionary principles. Their idea was to create music for the new Cuban cinema. This in turn created a cycle of experimentation and creativity that managed to surpass the very institution where the group came together.
This was a group of rebellious youth who were interested in and affected by what was happening in the island in 1969. The world itself was changing, and young people were more convinced than ever that they could affect change. Countries were being liberated. The Cuban Revolution inspired Latin America. People were fighting to change their lives, and music was instrumental in this process.
Echoes from that project can still be heard today in Cuban music. Real Project reinterprets famous hits, using new technology to adapt to today's tastes and expectations.
The experimental sound group is the big bang of the new trova. Back in '69, the group came together thanks to Alfredo Guevara and Aide Santa Maria, who were there through the most difficult of times. They were protecting the sound of our nation and the sound of the revolution.
As such, Real Project pays homage to one of the cornerstones of Cuban music and cinema.
And with that, we end our news brief. But you can find all of our stories by checking our website, telesurenglish.net. And be sure to also join us on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Carla Gonzalez. Thank you for watching.